My wife informed me at her sister's wedding she had slept with the best man. The time frame is important here. We have been married for 3 years. We were together as a couple for 2 years before that. So we've been together for about 5 years. 2 weekends ago her sister got married and of course my wife was in the wedding party. So as you would expect she spent the 2 weeks prior to the wedding helping her sister get everything ready. No big deal at all, she kept me informed and I knew this was going to happen. She took that Wednesday to Friday off of work to help her and in fact stayed with her 3 days. I certainly know her sister but I barely know the guy who is now my brother-in-law. In fact only met him a few times but he seems nice enough. I show up Saturday morning a few hours before the ceremony in hopes of stealing just a few minutes to see her, not wanting to intrude on the day since I know she is busy but I hadn't seen her since Tuesday. She sees me outside of her parents' house and sends her brother out to tell me that she will come out and see me at the car. Which I thought was odd but whatever. She finally comes out and sits in the seat next to me and gives me a kiss but instead of acting happy to see me or whatever she tells me that she has to talk to me and she doesn't want it to ruin her sister's day. She informs me that at the reception, if I still want to go, I might hear some things about the best man and her and she didn't want it to be awkward or weird. I just kind of sat there stunned. She said that about 4 years ago she had a fling with him and that it didn't mean anything but she was aware that by nature I'm somewhat jealous and she wanted me to know in advance so that if I heard something that I wouldn't be surprised. Again I just kind of sat there. This was not how I thought my morning would go but I told her I appreciated knowing it and that it certainly wasn't a big deal now. She went back in the house and I went to eat lunch and decided to meet her at the church. As I'm eating and reading my phone it dawns on me. She said she had a fling with him 4 years ago and we've been together 5. My first reaction was to blow it off and think that she just told me the wrong time but the more I thought about it the more I started to remember about a year and a half of us being together she had a phase where she was really sketchy about her behavior, wasn't available when she normally was and went on 2 weekend camping trips that were with friends from work. Of course I'm a little knotted up over this but I know I have a long day ahead of me. I go to the wedding and sit there watching everything. After the wedding they have a line that you walk by and congratulate the bride and groom and the wedding party is standing in line as well. My wife is standing with some other guy, I don't know him at all, but the best man was there and I just went down the line and acted like no big deal. Get to the reception and it takes forever for them to come because of photos. She finally gets there and sits with me. I decided not to say anything as I didn't want to distract from the day. But instead of just letting it go she then tells me that each of the groomsmen and bridesmaids are going to dance and that she is going to be dancing with him. I asked why when she was not his partner for the party and she said that the maid of honor and her partner were actually married and wanted to dance with each other. At this point I'm a little more than perturbed but I try and not let it show. Thankfully I was smart enough to not drink because I freely admit I'm an angry drunk so I know when not to even partake. She talks to everyone around her and then the dance comes and he comes over and extends his arm and she gets up. I try not to watch and in fact I make it a point not to. She comes back with him in tow and they are joking like the best of friends. She decides that it would be a good idea to introduce us and while I didn't say to F off like I wanted to my greeting to him was probably then cordial. But it did not deter him from sitting and talking with her for a few minutes. The more they sat and talked and reminisced about old times and places the madder I got. Eventually I got up and went to the bathroom and when I came back he was gone. She decided to tell me that she thought I was rude which was not what I was all about hearing at the moment. I told her that this wasn't the time or place to talk about it but rest assured we would talk later. She sat there and then said that she was going to change clothes and as soon as she got back she was telling her sister that we were leaving because I had ruined her day but she didn't want me to ruin her sister's day as well. I told her that I was perfectly capable of not being a bother to her or her sister the rest of the day and that I did not want to be the cause of any drama so I would prefer to just stay. She went and changed clothes and then came back all in a huff. Now understand I have not said a word to her I even shook the other guy's hand. I guess I just looked miserable so that is what she was basing this off of. She was adamant about not staying and so I said that if she really wanted to go we could go but if she would rather stay I would be happy to stay or if she would like since I came in my own car I would leave so she could stay. She at first said that we should stay but then said if I couldn't act any better I should leave. I asked how I was acting and she said it was obvious I was trying to be like a silverback gorilla wanting to fight. I didn't know whether to laugh in her face or be offended. I went back in and sat down while she mingled with the other guest. I talked with her brother for a while but then ultimately ended up back at our table talking with her grandma. We leave at the same time and I arrived home just before she did. I was sitting in the living room waiting on her when she came in and did not beat around the bush. I simply asked her to retell me the story about this other guy and she said it word for word like before. After sitting and looking at her for a time I just said, "Are you sure about the time frame?" and she said she was. I then reminded her that we had been together for 5 years, so this fling was well over a year into our being together. What happened next I can't really put into words. Instead of being flustered or denying or anything, she simply said, "I know." So I asked her to explain and she tells me that they worked together and that it was just a physical thing and she felt like we weren't in a great place at the time and that she never had any feelings for him and never had any real intentions of leaving me. She just was having some fun for a few weekends. She said that it was probably a mistake on her part to tell me now, but she didn't want me to get blindsided. I did not take this the way she thought I would, I guess. We had a very large argument and ended when she told me I was being a child about all of this. That we were married and this happened way before that and our life together now has nothing to do with him or that time. Well, 2 things. 1, I adamantly disagree about this, has no bearing on us. She cheated on me and doesn't even have the goddamn decency to feel guilty about it. 2, I hate being told I am childish when I get upset over something. It pisses me off to no end because that is her way of acting superior to me. I told her I needed time to think and she told me there was nothing to think about. We loved each other and this didn't change anything. That was 2 weeks ago and I still am not over it. She has been trying the past few days to get me to talk to her, but I admit that for whatever reason I'm not viewing her the same as I did before this. Part of me is like that this is stupid. It happened a few years ago and we are married now and there hasn't been any problems at all. But then part of me is like I just found out she cheated on me and it hurts like a mother trucker, and what makes it worse is that instead of trying to understand how I feel, she is trying to guilt me into just not even thinking about it.
My narcissistic mother is demanding I invite her manipulative boyfriend to my wedding. She insists on him walking me down the aisle even though he abused me all my life. I hate my stepfather Dave with all of my being. Dave has been in my life since I was 6 years old and he was the man my mom cheated on my dad with. I always felt weird being dragged over to Dave's house by my mom. He always stank of cigarettes and I always felt like he didn't want me there. When I was 9 we moved far away for Dave's job and that angered me because although my parents had 50-50 custody of me, I only saw my dad for a total of 3 weeks a year. When I was 10 I made a joke to my mom as we were driving home from school and she laughed. I said I was going to tell Dave the joke because I knew it would make him mad. My mom slammed on the brakes and turned faster on me than I could blink. She started screaming at me for even thinking of doing that, and started yelling at me to respect my father. She referred to him as my father. She then yelled at me to get out of the car and that I was going to walk home, which was an hour walk. I got out and she sped away before I fully shut the door. I sat on the side of the road sobbing for 20 minutes but she never came back. I decided to walk to my grandparents' house, which was 45 minutes in the opposite direction of home. They weren't home, so I had no choice but to walk the now hour and 45-minute walk home. I had been gone for 3 hours when I finally walked through the door exhausted. My mother glanced up from the book she was reading on the couch and that was the most acknowledgement I got from her for the rest of the day. When I was 11 I was sitting in the family room cross-stitching when I heard Dave call my name. I acknowledged him and he walked into the room and said, he then turned and walked away. I sat in stunned silence for a moment before bursting into tears and running to my room. I was being bullied at school for my weight, but I was trying to not take it to heart because kids can be cruel. But now all my worst fears were affirmed by an adult. Hours later my mom came in angry with me for not going out and helping Dave when he asked me to. Between sobs, I explained to my mom what he had said to me. She shook her head and told me to get over it and that it was just Dave's sense of humor. I didn't eat anything for the next 4 days until I finally caved and ate whatever I could find in the kitchen. I hated myself for being so weak, and this kicked off an ed that I only started to recover from when I moved out at 18. I never received an apology from either of them. Dave was also a drunk. When my mom would work nights I hid in my room listening to him scream, swear and throw things around the house. One day he backed into our gate with his car and I heard him bashing on it with a hammer for hours one night, which terrified me. He only laid hands on me twice, thankfully. Both times I told my mom and she dismissed it both times. When I was 13 my mom arrived at my school in tears telling me she had broken up with Dave. I broke into the biggest smile and told her how happy I was for her and that we could finally be free and happy. I'll admit it was an insensitive thing to say, but I couldn't contain how elated I was. We moved into my grandparents' home and it was the best month of my life. Then my grandparents decided to take a 2-month trip across the country, and that's when Dave started to try and win my mom back. It started with flowers and chocolates at the door. Then he would buy a full week of groceries. My mom was starting to fall for it, but not fully, until he pulled out his end game, inviting me to do stuff this man had never taken an interest in.
I figured I'd find you in your natural habitat, the couch, since you're such a fat couch potato who does nothing but sit around and complain about everything all day long. I'm tired of it. We're gonna make you lose weight. I need you to help me in the backyard.
Me before. But now he was going on and on to my mom about how much he missed being my dad and how much he loved me. When I heard that I wanted to end him, he never loved me and he was not my dad, nor was he even a father figure. He knew how much I love whales, so he booked a whale watching tour for just the two of us. When my mom told me, I flat out refused to go. This resulted in me being punished. I had to clean the entire 3-story house from top to bottom, and I wasn't allowed to see any of my friends or do any of my hobbies until I apologized. That never happened, and I was officially grounded for 4 months because he kept planning things and I kept refusing to go. They eventually got back together and have been ever since. The man went back to being annoyed at my existence and never attempted any more one-on-one time again. Well, now I have moved far away and am engaged to my wonderful fiancé. I have decided to invite my mom against my better judgment, but refuse to invite Dave. My wedding is in a month and I sent out wedding invitations 2 months ago. My mom's invitation was only addressed to her and had no +1 on it. She RSVP'd right away and never mentioned to me that Dave wasn't on the invitation. I thought it was some kind of miracle because I was expecting to have a giant fight with her. When she never even mentioned it, I thought I might be in the clear. Now I wish I had clarified with her. My mom just called me to ask when she and her long-term boyfriend Dave should arrive at my wedding venue. We talked about it, and not only did my mom just assume there was a typo with the invitation, but she also thought Dave would be walking me down the aisle. My dad, the only parent who actually cared about me, would be walking me down the aisle. Mom said my dad didn't deserve it because, unlike Dave, he wasn't in my life that much. The conversation with my mom can be summed up as an all-out screaming match on both our parts, and my mom telling me she wouldn't be attending if Dave wasn't allowed to come. I just said fine, don't come, and hung up the phone. My mom proceeded to blow up my phone with calls and texts saying I didn't love her, and if I loved her I would let the only dad I ever truly knew to perform his fatherly duty of walking me down the aisle. She started bashing my fiancé, saying he was brainwashing me. That she knew her sweet little daughter was in there somewhere and I just had to let her out. I stopped responding after this. After being ignored for 5 hours, my mom took to Facebook to paint this sob story of how I was pushing her and Dave out for no good reason and that they were heartbroken they had raised such an awful woman. Her post pretty much went along in the same vein as her text to me. I simply chose not to engage with her, and when family and friends contacted me to ask what was going on, I simply told them the truth. Most of them except a great aunt and a few of my mom and Dave's friends are on my side, but this is all getting exhausting. No matter what I say, nothing's getting through to this woman and I just want it all to stop. I have fallen in love with my arranged marriage husband, who doesn't love me back and sleeps with other women because I let him. My and my husband's marriage was an arranged one between our parents. I was 16, and he was 23 when they forced us together. Luckily, my husband was a good man, and compared to most of my friends, my marriage was peaceful. He never hurt me or treated me like a servant, and I'm so grateful to be married to him instead of anyone else. Our first year was incredibly painful because both our parents demanded grandchildren and neither of us was strong enough to resist them. Luckily, we only had to do the deed about 5 times for me to get pregnant with twins, and I thoroughly hated it so much that after we got the positive result, he promised never to touch me again. Something that most men wouldn't have done. It was so painful for me that I was crying every time. I don't blame him too much for the bad experience because we were both V-card owners, but that week was enough for me to never want intimacy again. After my sons were born in a thankfully easy birth, we stayed in our country until I was 18 before he got a job in Canada, something we have been after since our marriage. He's a doctor and a really good one. We left our family and moved here. And we were finally free. And neither of us wants to go back. Me for obvious reasons, and him because he's fifth of 11 siblings and his entire family is horrible like my parents. He offered me a divorce if I wanted, so I could have a new life. But I have no education, so I cannot work, and I have 2 sons that need their father, so even though I didn't love him, I stayed and told him as much. We became more like friends, and our marriage only existed on paper, but he was never bad to me. He gave me money to spend and would buy me things, and I would cook him his favorite food and keep the house nice for him, and do all the chores. Our children never knew that their parents didn't love each other because we were always nice to each other. And when we got here, I asked him if I could get an education, so he enrolled me in a local university to study business. I'm almost done now, so I can start working and actually do something besides go crazy in my house. My sons started daycare after we came here so that they would learn English, and I started to get really bored, so I downloaded a bunch of apps on my phone, because he bought me a brand new iPhone. After a few months here, he sat me down and told me that he had urges that only a woman could fill, but he didn't want to hurt me and wouldn't force me to do anything. He asked for my permission to have intimacy with other women, and I said yes. As long as he hid it from other people and our kids, I don't care what he did. He would go out every Friday and come back happy, and I was just happy that he was satisfied. I didn't love him, but I cared for him like I would a friend. When 2020 happened, I got very sick early. He pulled a lot of strings so I could get the best care in the hospital he worked at. I was useless for almost a month and a half, and he was amazing. He looked after my needs, kept my sons happy, and worked at the same time. What sparked my love was something he did when I was in really bad pain. I was at home then, but I still couldn't really do anything without getting out of breath. It was nighttime and he was helping me get into bed, but I was struggling for some reason and my entire body was painful. I was trying really hard not to cry and he noticed. He picked me up, sat down on the bed and laid my head on his lap. He started to stroke my hair while singing to me until I fell asleep, and when I woke up, he had fallen asleep in that position because I was sleeping on him. I didn't want to wake him, so I covered him with a blanket and hugged him until he woke up an hour later. He was so tender with me when I was sick that I fell in love, and even after I was cured, he was still so kind to me. When I'm grumpy, he makes me coffee, when I'm sad he hugs me, and he does so many other things that show that he cares about me. When I went through a period after my sickness where I thought I was ugly, he started to tell me I was beautiful several times during the day. Something he still does. I started to work out with him last summer, and I know it seems a bit boastful, but I think I'm really attractive now. Men started to flirt with me, and even though I would never stray, he is always so protective of me. It just makes me love him more. And he's so good to our sons too. So patient and helpful, even though it's not his duty. I don't remember a single conversation I had with my father where he didn't yell at me. But when my husband talks to my sons, he is so gentle and kind. But he doesn't love me. I was touching him a lot more, and he started to hug me before work, and after I asked, he even started to sleep in the same bed and cuddle me. He rests his head on my chest and I pet his hair until he falls asleep, and even the way he breathes on me is just perfect. I don't know how to describe it, but I think he looks the most attractive while asleep in my arms. 2020 was the best thing that ever happened to me because I fell in love with my husband. But after it ended, he started to go out every Friday again. And every time he leaves after our children go to sleep, my heart would hurt. I hate that he sleeps with other women, even though it's my fault. And I know that he would stop if I asked, but it would be selfish of me to deny his urges when I can't satisfy him. He even asked me after 2020 ended if I was okay with him still going out. And I wanted to say no, but I said yes and then ended up crying myself to sleep while holding his shirt that Friday night. A few weeks ago, I followed him and watched him go out for dinner with the beautiful blonde woman. They were flirting so much, and they had intimacy in his car while I spied on them. We have 2 cars, and he uses that. One only for his dates, so that me and my sons will never notice anything. Then they went to a cheap hotel with her for 3 hours. They were on the first floor with the window open, and I watched them do so many things, in so many positions that I felt dirty for spying. But I was also so jealous of that woman. He texted me that he was coming home, something he always does even though I'm usually asleep. I drove back home before he came out and made him a snack. He was surprised that I was awake and asked if I was waiting for him, and I asked him how it was. He was uncomfortable talking about it, but I just wanted to know more, so he told me everything. Her name, that he tries to hire her at least once a month, what they do, and so much more. He calls the company and he hires a girl from them every weekend. He tries to get the blonde because she's his favorite because she never says no to anything he asks. I want him to do all those things to me, but at the same time I remember how much it hurt, and I don't want to do it. If I tell him that I love him, I know that he would stop going out, and he won't be as happy. And I also don't know how to have intimacy because the last time I did it was when I was 16. He won't enjoy it with me because I can't do the things I saw the other women do. But watching him enjoy other women from the side because I gave him permission stabs my heart every time he goes out. My manipulative fiancé has been super secretive about his phone throughout our entire relationship. I snooped through and the reason broke my heart. This last weekend, my ex confessed. I put this in quotations because it was a large Dutch oven full of steaming horse crap. I came home from work one morning and he was waiting for me, which is odd, because he's usually asleep. He said that we needed to talk. We sat down together and he told me his tall tale, that a woman he had met, his mistress, at his co-worker's wedding had been contacting him on and off for a few months after receiving his number from a mutual friend, and kept asking to meet because she found him attractive and wanted to get to know him better. He had never responded to her flirtatious messages or requests to meet up, but would sometimes chat with her. Recently, he told her that he was flattered but was happily engaged, and asked her to stop contacting him because he didn't think they could be friends since she kept pursuing him and was getting progressively insistent. He stated that this woman then became angry and began threatening him and insulting him, like some typical nice girl or whatever, telling him that he'd led her on. He apologized for never telling me, but he didn't think it was important because he had either ignored her or things were pretty innocent, but decided to tell me now because of her shocking reaction when he asked her to stop. He promised me that that was all that happened, and offered to show me the messages if I wanted to see them. I was quiet for a few minutes. He looked extremely worried and begged me to say something. My mind was racing and my heart was beating out of my chest. After every sentence he spoke, in my head I was saying, lie, lie, another lie. Pretty good lie, but still a lie. Lie. Wow, the truth? Nope, just kidding, lie. I wanted to confront him, tell him what I knew, point in his face, show him the screenshots I took, scream at him. But again, I didn't do any of those things. Instead I said that I was really disappointed and hurt that he kept this information from me, but I told him that I trusted him and did not need to see his phone. I asked him to please just continue to be honest with me from now on. My ex held me tightly, apologized many more times, promised to make it up to me, and continued to reassure me that he was being honest. He said he loved me and wanted to be with me forever and would never hurt me. I was his dream girl and he couldn't possibly be happier with me. I asked him if he was sure he had nothing else to tell me. He looked me in my eyes and said he didn't. He promised. I asked if he ever met up with her, platonically or otherwise. He said he only spoke with her and hung out with her briefly among others at the wedding as he was a groomsman and she a bridesmaid. He also confessed that when he was worried that I had cheated on him a couple of weeks ago, he got extremely scared because it made him rack his brain trying to think of whether he had done something that would make me angry or cause me to stray, and that while he feels silly about it now for thinking that I had cheated, it had put the fear of God in him, for lack of a better phrase. He then felt super guilty and decided to come clean because even though I'm not cheating, he was so worried that he wants to make sure there is a clean slate. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to take a hot shower and melt the skin off and then swim in a pool of lemon juice. I could not believe the nerds on this slimy worm of a man. Either he ended things with the mistress and is expecting blowback and trying to cover for it now in case she reaches out to me, or she dumped him and he's trying to crawl back to me. Or maybe he's still seeing her. I completely shut down. I was cold and distant. He noticed. He apologized to me every day, asking me if I was still mad. He offered many times to show me the messages to assure me that nothing else happened. He asked me if there was anything he could do to make me happy again. He told me he knew he deserved it for not coming forward sooner, but he promised he wasn't lying about anything. He was just being an idiot and didn't think it was important, but he sees now that it was, and he would be just as upset if the tables were turned. He cried a few times. I brushed him off and told him I would get over it, and he just needed to give me time. He agreed. And then the day finally came, and I left. I moved into my new house yesterday. It was pretty uneventful, and even kind of fun. After I got the text from my ex confirming that he made it to work safely, my friends and their boyfriends came by to meet the movers with me, and we had my entire house cleared within 45 minutes. We laughed and joked the entire time. They assured me that they would be my bodyguards if my ex showed up. I scanned the house a few times before I left and felt very satisfied. The only things left are a dining table, a small TV, and an entertainment center in our bedroom that he bought, and of course all of his personal things. Other than that, everything else is gone. After much thought, I decided that I was not going to leave any of the screenshots that I took. However, I am still keeping them in case I need them. I wanted him to be reeling over what I may or may not know. I want him to relive the day he confessed, and I hope he feels absolutely horrified when he realizes that I knew the entire time. Instead, I printed an email he sent me a few months ago, which was a very long ranting about how much he loved me, couldn't wait to marry me and have children with me and buy our first house together, and how lucky he was to have such a loyal, devoted, and hard-working partner. He detailed how he would never do anything to jeopardize our relationship. He sent me this email 3 days before the text messages between his mistress about how boring, fat, and ugly I was, and how he couldn't wait to run away with her and start their perfect lives together. I put this email into an envelope and wrote his mistress's name on the front of it. I left it on the kitchen counter, with my engagement ring and keys on top. I took one more look around and then shut the door on our home and this chapter of my life. When I got in my car, I cried for the first time since the day I first found the messages. I had to pull over and my friends comforted me while I cried my eyes out, snot bubbling, snorting, lip quivering, put Kim K to shame crying. My heart broke into a million pieces all at once. My friends pet my hair, held my hands, and cried with me too. They're so good to me and I'm so thankful that I finally decided to stop being so antisocial and reach out to them. The best thing that has come out of this situation was bonding with these two women. I changed my number today, but my ex is tech savvy. I don't know if I won't be found. I am about to destroy my relationship with my mom, which was built off of a lie she kept for over 40 years. I recently discovered some interesting information about my mother that has forever changed how I view her. My dad met my mom when my dad was 39 and my mom was 26. My dad had 2 children from a previous marriage that were just turning 19 and 17. So the age difference was already really weird. My mom has a sister 10 years younger than her and we will call her Dean. Dean was 16 when she needed to leave her childhood home due to a pretty nasty home situation. She came to live with my mom and my dad, whom at the time were only dating. At some point during Dean's stay with my parents, which was several years, an affair occurred between Dean and my dad. This resulted in my older sister, who we can call Jay. Apparently, my mom had no idea Jay was my dad's until Jay was almost 7 years old. Heartbroken, my mom took some time to think but ultimately stayed with my dad and had me about a year later after difficult fertility issues. To this day, Dean has never seen the wrong in what she did and has tried to break my parents apart any chance that she gets. Present day, the story that is above is the story my parents have fed me and anyone else that will listen, for nearly 40 years. But I just discovered that they have been lying to me and it just keeps getting worse. This all unfolded because I was helping my parents move and I came across an old journal. It was in a box that was going to be thrown out and I can't explain why, but I just reached out and took it and started reading. Why did I do that? My mom knew my dad was having an affair long before he confessed. Because Dean came and told my mom in the beginning that my dad was hitting on her and she did not like it. She felt he was too old. My mom never confronted my dad about it though. Instead she called Dean jealous. For answers I went to a trusted aunt who was pretty present for the entire situation at that time. She said she had been waiting years for me to ask about this. The things she told me were horrible. My dad is a predator and my mom has covered it for 40 years. And she's done it by playing the victim and vilifying her baby sister. I don't have a relationship with Dean or Jay because of what my parents told me over the years. They kept me isolated and made me feel like my sister did not want me. So much time. If I confront my parents, it's over. I know they would never speak to me again for even thinking they lied to me and for listening to my aunt. My mom and I have also gotten in a better place these past 2 years and is incredibly helpful when it comes to my daughter. Truth is, I don't know if I trust her around my daughter anymore, especially with my dad. I'm disgusted by her actions in all of this. Her ability to lie for so long and gaslight me anytime I got close to the truth. I've even covered up my dad's other affairs over the years, claiming articles of clothing that my mom found as mine so that the peace could remain in our family. I feel bad for doing that, but I was 13 at the time. I thought it was the right thing to do and I felt guilty about it ever since. But now that I know my mom is actually knowledgeable about who he is and is in denial, I could never look at either of them the same. Sheesh. Unfortunately, it has gotten far worse than I could have ever imagined. I decided that I wanted to speak with my Aunt Dean. I had never had a conversation with her before and I did not know what she even sounded like for 30 years. When I spoke with her, we cried and she told me everything I wanted to know. She was so thankful that I finally broke out of my parents' delusion and decided to reach out. I am so happy that I have my Aunt Dean and my sister Jay in my life now, and though 30 years were wasted, we are working on getting together next year and we text and call nearly weekly since this all happened. The far worst part? Nearly everything my parents told me in childhood about my family was a lie to keep me isolated. My extended family knew my parents were isolating me because they never brought me around anywhere with my family, for fear that I would overhear gossip about my mom and dad. Apparently I was constantly invited to my cousins' birthday parties and family trips. But what I was told growing up was that my cousins were older and didn't want their baby cousin there. With one set of cousins, I was told they never invited me to their birthday parties at all because my uncle was white passing and I was not. He had an image to uphold with his neighbors and I was too dark. My parents told me this and allowed me to believe this as a small child. I have since confirmed with this uncle that this was far from the truth. He would practically beg for my mom to allow me to go to their parties because my cousins loved me and really missed me. The reason I couldn't go? Because Dean and Jay were there. I also thought for over a decade that my sister uninvited me to her wedding because she was embarrassed to share how we were related to one another. Turns out, my mom told them I did not want to go because I was mad I couldn't be in the wedding party. Me and my sister were at odds for over a decade over this until just 2 nights ago. The really hurtful part though. When I confronted my mom last weekend, we got on the topic of discipline and she admitted to hitting my developmentally delayed daughter along with my dad after I told them if they ever put their hands on her that I would put my hands on them. When I made that promise, they both said they never had and never would. And it was convenient to lie because my daughter is for the most part nonverbal. She says some phrases and is getting much better, but still, we cannot rely on her to tell us what happened to her. I lost it on her. I started dumping my childhood at her, and telling her I knew about the lies she told, how I don't know who the F they are and they are never allowed around my daughter again. I'm mortified that I allowed my daughter to be with them. I know they were lying, but I wasn't trusting my gut and I'm very disappointed in myself as a mom right now. Shame on her and shame on him. After all I had to say, her only response was that her siblings had done a number on me and wanted me to hate my own father. I asked her, "Are you not ashamed of who the F you are?" She said, "I'm only ashamed I didn't hide it better." Y'all. I found out last weekend, I never had parents. I lived with abusive strangers my entire childhood, and yes, abusive, it's too much to put into this post, but when I share my childhood, it has brought even my therapist to tears. I wanted to trust that they would never do that to my daughter, but I was so wrong, and I have to live with that. Not the update I was hoping to give, but the silver lining is I now have a family who has brought me and my daughter in with open arms and warmth. I will forever be grateful for learning this really difficult truth. Stay safe out there, you never really know anyone. My brother shamed my 15-year-old sister for being gay at his wedding reception, and my parents are making her talk to someone at church. Plus update. My brother and his fiancée were married last weekend, but my sister Iris has been punished and yelled at a lot this week. My brother and I don't have a great relationship, and when he lived with us, he barely spent any time with us either. My parents paid for him to go to college, and before last weekend, they were planning to help me and my sister go too. However, as a result of what happened last week, my parents told my sister that they're not letting her do sports or hang out with friends until she apologizes for being gay and talks to a pastor at church. They've barely gotten on my brother Matt for humiliating her last week. When I tried to defend her and talk to them on her behalf, they also yelled at me and said that they wouldn't pay for me to go to college if I don't stop because I should know it's wrong, but when I continued to argue with them, they said I'm not allowed to work next year and that I won't be taking driver's ed either. I don't know what made my brother shame and expose her last week. When he spoke at the reception, he said that he felt led to say something that was on his mind and told everyone that my sister is gay. He also said that she needed prayer to get support, and my parents had no idea that she was gay either. I knew because my sister told me some time back, but when I asked if she ever told Matt after the wedding, she said she didn't, but that she told Ariana, Matt's fiancée. Ariana would sometimes drive my sister to sports if my parents couldn't, and they became close and would sometimes go out for ice cream too. I wasn't particularly close with her, but she was close to her. Iris said that Ariana was very supportive when she told her about it and how she was afraid to tell her parents. And she also said that Ariana showed her some resources when they would go out for ice cream or sports too. However, the only way that she figured Matt would know was if she somehow told him and thought that he'd be safe. That's her best guess about how he found out, but my parents are fairly religious and opinionated on such matters, and that's why she was punished this week too. I used to know someone in my friend group who was gay, and my parents weren't crazy about him and encouraged me to not hang around him too. His parents went to our church, but he wasn't really religious, and Dad said that his parents were failing him among other things and how he will be punished because God never intended for that. Iris was embarrassed and started crying after he outed her, and while Dad later told my brother that he didn't like him saying that in front of everyone, he still yelled at her and took away sports and seeing friends until she talks to someone at church. That hasn't happened yet, and he's also yelled at me for trying to stand up for her. I could care less about what happens with my college because she's barely talking to me and Mom took away her phone and laptop too. Dad actually laid hands on Iris when we came home. She has bruises down her back now. My brother also said that Ariana went to her parents the day after the wedding and has been staying there, and as of right now, she hasn't come back yet. He's also come over to talk to my parents, but I think that was more about Ariana for the most part. I can't tell you how much I hate him because she won't talk to me, but when I try to tell my parents that they are wrong to punish her, they just cursed at me and took away some of my privileges too. And they also said that I won't be going to driver's ed or working because I was being disrespectful and that if I keep it up, they won't pay for my college either, and I just feel hopeless. Update: my sister was really afraid of having to talk to someone at church, and the pastor she ended up talking to was one of the senior pastors. She hoped that it would be someone from youth, but Dad said that I couldn't be there with her when they talked, and he didn't tell me when they'd be talking either. I hate how she went around my back to do it. I tried to talk to her when I got back and asked what happened, and she said they filled her head with scriptures about going to hell and Dad threatened to disown her if she doesn't charge her ways. I tried to tell her again that the safest thing to do is probably to lay low so that it passes sooner and they don't give her a hard time, and I told her that before that day too. However, she's recently begun to lash out at me for trying to talk to her about anything. She was distant before, but now she just gets upset and wants nothing to do with me at all. I was also able to talk to a teacher a few days after, and I told her everything. She agreed that my parents were being ridiculous about everything and that my brother was just as bad as them, but she also said that she would have to report it, and I told her that I wanted her to do that too, since she was also physically hurt in the aftermath of the reception. However, when she said that she could try to talk to Iris, I told her that maybe she would open up to her because she wanted nothing to do with me even after I told her about my intentions to tell a teacher, only for her to just get angry and tell me to leave her alone. She said that she would try and have to report it regardless, but my parents talked to me after they received a call from someone that they refused to specify about what happened. But they told me that Iris told them that I spoke to a teacher, which led to them getting a call, and that they want me to leave Iris alone and stop talking about our family. Dad also said that I no longer have my college fund and that he'll be using the money to help Matt try to sue Ariana for being abusive by ghosting him the day after the reception, and that he'll kick me out if I bother Iris again. He didn't want me talking to her, but I was able to at school because there was no way that he could prevent us there. But, again, she wanted nothing to do with me and tried to avoid me with the exception of telling me to leave her alone and just getting upset. Iris still wants nothing to do with me, and she has been talking to my parents a lot more without the screaming from the aftermath of the reception. However, Ariana broke her silence along with her parents and told others why she left and that she wanted nothing to do with Matt. Ariana said she didn't know that Matt had such feelings towards his sister and that he was homophobic when he came across the LGBT resources she was acquiring for Iris and asked about who they were for. Personally, I didn't think that she tried to hurt Iris because it made no sense that Matt and Dad would try to sue her if she agreed. She also said that she wanted a divorce as well. However, Dad took to social media and fabricated a lie that Ariana had previously tried to pressure Iris into intimate activity when she drove her to sports and that it led to her being confused about being gay and that she tried to rope her. He also said that Iris told him about it, but I don't believe Iris told him that at all because he said it after she broke her silence. But when I went to ask Iris, she still refused to talk to me. I tried to stress to her that it's important to know because Dad's accusing her of something that's very dangerous. But she still refused to tell me much, and Dad made this post a couple of days ago, so it's still fresh. He also has a lawyer that's working with him and Matt, but Iris is only talking to our parents, so I feel really lost. Maybe they're pressuring her to avoid me and say nothing, but she still won't tell me much. When I asked her if Dad made up that lie about Ariana, she refused to answer and just got upset, but when I asked if they were pressuring her into saying nothing, she didn't respond either and just asked me to leave. However, when I directly asked if Ariana had ever done anything to her, she shook her head but didn't give me any more than that, and I honestly believe she's being pressured into saying nothing and that they're possibly threatening her with further punishment.
My narcissistic parents told my golden child brother to propose at my wedding because my fiancé loves me and his girlfriend is going to leave him. My brother has always been the favorite because he was planned. My parents only wanted one kid, but they had an accidental pregnancy and had me. They don't believe in abortion, so my mom carried me full term. That didn't stop her from resenting me for being born. My brother makes fun of me by calling me a mistake. That was my nickname growing up and my parents never stopped him from calling me that. In fact, when I went to them crying about it, they just said that he was right because they never wanted another kid. So, after high school I moved out, went to college purely on scholarships and grants, and now I'm living a really good life. The best part? I'm engaged to my beautiful fiancée and I can't wait to marry her in April. She wanted a spring wedding and what my bride-to-be wants, my bride-to-be gets. Well, the problem started last Saturday when my parents called me over to their house to talk about something. They were very cryptic about it and refused to tell me what it was over the phone. When I got there, my older brother was there too, so I knew this wasn't going to be good. My parents sat me down and told me that my brother wants to use my wedding as the perfect day for him to propose to his girlfriend. I laughed in their faces because I couldn't believe they were asking me something so stupid, but they were dead serious. I was instantly mad and told them absolutely not. But they ganged up on me. I was so enraged and threw all the abuse and neglect I experienced for 18 years in their faces. I told them that I was miserable living with them and sometimes I wish I hadn't even been born because they clearly never wanted me. My brother laughed and mumbled, "Yeah, who would?" And that pushed me over the edge. I said that if they want to do this, then not only will they all be uninvited, but I'll also cut off the financial support I've been giving monthly since they paid to have my golden child brother go through college by taking out a second mortgage. Because even after all this abuse, I was still helping them out financially while they gave my loser brother everything he wanted, even if it meant they were going to go broke. Without me, they wouldn't have even been able to retire because my brother spent half of their retirement money on boats, an apartment that he completely trashed that ended in him getting kicked out, and my parents had to pay for all the damages he caused, and even had a failed business at some point that caused a pretty penny. I, on the other hand, landed a decently high-paying job and have been sending $1,000 to my parents monthly to help ease their mortgage. I didn't ask for a stake in the ownership of their house either because I really don't want it. It was entirely goodwill, but I can cut it off any time I want and right then and there, I really wanted to. However, it was only a threat at the time. I left soon after, really angrily might I add, but my brother came to my home the next day to yell at me that I ruined his big chance. For once in my life, my parents were siding with me and they said they'll evict him if he tries to propose at my wedding. He accused me of financially blackmailing our parents, and said that he just wanted a good chance to propose because he was afraid his girlfriend might leave him soon. I told him that was his problem, not mine, because my wedding day is not about him, and if he tries to propose at my wedding, I will have him thrown out. That's not a maybe, but a definite. Besides, I doubt his girlfriend would appreciate her proposal followed up with being tossed out by a bouncer. He yelled that this was why his parents never loved me and why they also called me a mistake behind my back. I was pretty hurt by that, but it wasn't things I didn't already know. In the end, he went crying to our grandmother, so she called me to try to convince me to let him propose. Turns out, my brother completely changed the story to make me out to be this huge villain who called him every name in the book. Even after I told her the real story, she still sided with him. That just goes to show how deep his golden child syndrome goes. She tried to hold her ground, but the verbal backlash I ended up giving her left her crying. That got back to my parents, who were pissed at me for taking things so far. But I told them I only went that far because I had to when they were all trying to get me to let my brother use my wedding as his springboard for a proposal. They ended up agreeing with me, but still stated they feel like I'm crass. My brother showed up at my home again to scream at me that I'm an a-hole, and I hope I'm happy with myself for not allowing him the opportunity. As for my fiancée, she knows what my brother is trying to do and she's very angry about it. She's almost ready to have him uninvited if he pursues this any further. Normally I have a very mild temper. But when it comes to certain people like my brother, parents and grandmother, I can easily get short with them because of all the past favoritism. My grandmother especially. She always sided with my brother and believed his lies no matter what he did. She's the biggest reason my parents favored my brother too. Anyway, I ended up speaking with my brother again and threatened to tell his girlfriend if he was still intending to propose at my wedding without permission. He took it poorly and called me an awful person, so I pointed out that my wedding isn't about him. Our parents were there for this, and they backed me up. I think my brother did a double take when they did that. My dad pointed out that he'd raised my brother wrong, and that was on him. So, from now on my brother was to show them real respect, and they wanted to get an official lease drawn up for him to pay proper rent and utilities because my brother was living with them for free. If he chooses not to pay, he can move out and they'll rent his room to someone else. My brother turned to our mom for help, but she just agreed with dad. He looked like he was having a conniption and then left the house. We only found out where he went 2 days later because he announced that he was moving in with grandma because she invited him. Our parents basically told him that if he wants to live with her, then to go ahead. My brother responded to this by saying we all hate him for just wanting to propose to his girlfriend. My parents pointed out that it's not that he wanted to propose, but where he wanted to do it, and he'd get no support for it. He's refusing to talk to our parents now. My grandmother did call me again, but I told her he wasn't proposing at my wedding so he can get it or not come, and the same goes for her. I ended up calling her out on her favoritism towards my brother since we were kids, which she tried to deny at first, but couldn't keep doing because of how much I'd pointed out. She ended up crying again while I told her that if she keeps trying to insist on this, then she won't be coming to my wedding. She begged me not to rescind her invitation, but still said she doesn't understand why I couldn't let my brother have his way before ending the call. My fiancé is fully ready to remove my brother and grandmother from the wedding. My mom called me the other day to tell me she spoke with my grandmother. She had told her everything I had said in our conversation, and my mom finally saw that she had favored my brother a little too much. She ended up tearing my brother a new a-hole, but he still tried to justify himself to her. That's when she told him they were through and cut all contact with him. My brother of course blamed me. Even though his girlfriend said that she's been ready to leave him for a while now, and if he'd tried to propose, no matter where, she'd have told him no. He is now boycotting my wedding, which is honestly for the best. I said I wouldn't miss him, and that he's in his 30s now and needs to grow up. Our parents have cut the umbilical cord and are no longer supporting him. They're already planning on renting his room to someone else because they need the money after the financial hole he left them in after dropping out of college, just to do mooch off them for a while and then get a degree with online college later, and not paying any rent while also making them pay for his food and utilities despite having a good paying job. They spent the world on him and he wasn't the least bit grateful. That made my brother just shut down and leave my home. Since then we have not heard a peep out of him. Tried to get revenge on my liquid kids guzzling sister, but she ruined her own life. When I, 29, was little, like 7 years old, my dad cheated on my mother with my stepmom, Karen. After her divorce, my mom moved away and got married again. I was always under the impression that my mother abandoned me, and that's what my dad told me too. Karen had a daughter at that time who was 5, Mia. Mia and I were kinda close growing up. But when we both hit puberty, our personality was different. Mia was the typical girly girl. She developed beautifully. She was basically like Cassie from Euphoria. She would get all the attention. Even my relatives preferred her more than me. I was basically a nerd. I was interested in sports, but I was told that I do not look bad and I am very attractive and pretty in my own way. But I was overshadowed by Mia. My dad was someone who was an opportunist. Whenever he would see an opportunity for him to shine, he would take it. Even if it meant sidelining his own daughter. He saw that Mia got more attention than me, so he invested everything on her. I was kinda jealous. But I wasn't really that bothered because I believed if I did something good I would be appreciated. So, I studied hard and got into a prestigious university. That was the only time my father threw a party for me because I was the first in the family to do it. But Mia was jealous of it. So, anyways, during my last year of high school I started dating Tim, 30. He proposed to me when we were sophomores in college. But we decided to wait till our graduation. So one day during our semester break, I went to his home and I saw him effing Mia. I was shocked to say the least. I remember I was crying and screaming at him. I could never forget the smirk on Mia's face. That's when I knew Mia was a B word. So, my dad and stepmom knew about it, and guess what? My dad told me to forgive them. His logic: Tim fell out of love with me, so he fell in love with your sister. You should give them your blessing instead of being petty. I shouted back, of course you will say that because you cheated on mom. My dad and I had a screaming match. He told me he would disown me if I do not accept them and come to their wedding. I remember that I stormed off and I cried for days. That's the moment I realized I was alone. My dad didn't care if I was dead or alive. I started therapy after a friend of mine pushed me to it. It did help a bit, but in my mind I wanted some revenge. I wanted to be petty and make her regret it. I started thinking about what I could do. My initial plan was to wear white on her wedding day. But then I ran into Mia's ex, Jay. Jay and Mia have been one of those couples who are on again off again. Mia exploited Jay a lot. The last time they broke up was when Jay caught Mia flirting with one of his friends. But there was a lot of history. So, when Jay learned about Mia and Tim, he was a little angry. He kept saying he wishes he could just take revenge on all the times Mia has done him wrong. So, I had another plan. I asked him to be my +1 at her wedding. I know Mia still has feelings for Jay. It would piss her off. But we agreed that after that we would part ways. So when the wedding came, I was not in the wedding party. My dad was cordial with me because I wasn't creating trouble. So I went to her wedding with Jay and I was wearing a bright red dress because I read that red means you slept with the groom. It was also over the top. I might have made some heads turn. When Mia saw me with Jay, her face turned pale. I was purposely being very touchy with Jay, like whispering in his ears, touching his shoulder, dancing with him very closely. I swear Mia was just as red as my dress. I was also asked to give a speech. I kept it short. Thank God I do not have more sisters, otherwise Tim would have swapped Mia with one of them. You know he has a fetish of effing his fiance's sisters behind her back. Me and Jay were asked to leave. The next day I was bombarded with messages and phone calls. I didn't pick any of them. As for Jay, he stuck to our deal and I never saw him again. After the wedding incident, I decided I should find my mom because something in me was telling me that she didn't abandon me. It wasn't hard to find her. I found her on Facebook and we started chatting. She is married and has 2 boys, my half-brothers. I got the real story from her. She didn't abandon me. My father won the custody case. He used my mom's past substance abuse to take away her visitation rights too. We reconciled and for the first time in my life I felt welcomed. I also met my stepfather and my 2 brothers. They are amazing people. Since then, I would regularly meet them. 2 years after the wedding incident, I met a guy, Andy. We met during an alumni program in our college. He also went to our college, but he was 5 years my senior. We had a lot in common. He was kind, sweet and very mature. He knows about my past and has been really supportive. He was better than Tim in every other way. He was charming and had a really higher position in his job. After 2 years my sister contacted me out of the blue and told me she was pregnant and she now wants to bury the hatchets. I was very reluctant. I was afraid that she would try to steal Andy away from me as well. But Andy reassured me he is not that weak. Honestly, I do wanted to meet Dad again. So, I gave it a shot anyways. I went on dinner with Andy. And to my surprise Tim recognized him. It was later revealed to me that Andy was basically Tim's boss. This is the fact I didn't know. My dad and stepmom brought me to a corner and said that my relationship with Andy is unacceptable because I'm trying to hurt my sister by dating Tim's boss. I told them to F off. My love life is none of their business. The dinner went sour. After that I got a drunken call from Tim that he is very unhappy with my sister and that he actually wants to escape. He never knew what he lost until he saw me with Andy. I ignored him totally. Then the phone calls didn't stop. First it was my dad telling me that me dating Andy is causing tension between my sister and Tim. I told him their marital life is none of my business. I got call from my stepsister who asked if she could come to my house and talk. I told her after the dinner party, I want nothing to do with any of them. That TCH didn't listen. Instead she went to Andy's office to convince him to talk to me. Of course Tim saw this and accused her of trying to seduce Andy like he seduced him. Long story short, Andy had to fire Tim for his misbehave. This caused even more tension. Tim became verbally abusive towards Mia and said his life was ruined because of her. They separated. Tim is trying to figure out how can he handle the divorce proceedings. After the Tim and Mia drama, my dad suddenly showed up in my apartment. He was bawling his eyes out that he caught Karen sleeping with his male cousin. He was devastated. So, I told him what he said to me when Tim cheated on me. Karen fell out of love with you so she fell in love with your cousin. You should give them your blessing instead of being petty. My dad was confused. I further told him, well, you taught me this, remember? When I was sad about Tim cheating on me with Mia. You told me to forgive them. My father's face was rotten to say the least. Now I have 2 family members who are going through divorce. Tim and Mia tried to reconcile but eventually they settled for divorce. My dad did apologize to me for what he did to me and Mom. I told him that he deserved what's coming for him and that I have no feeling left for him. Not even pity. If the time ever comes I might forgive him, but I don't want him anymore. He will not be walking me down the aisle. Andy and I are recently engaged. We are having a small ceremony with just close friends and family. I was only planning for a petty revenge, but karma got them better.
My golden child sister tried framing me for a felony. She was caught on camera many times and it ruined her life. My younger sister has always been my mom's golden child since she's the youngest out of 4. My 2 older brothers were at university and out of the picture, while I was considered a disappointment because of my poor grades. My sister was a straight A student, but my parents had no idea that she cheated on all of her tests. They would also allow her to have parties at our house while they weren't home, and even when they wouldn't allow her she still would. Anyways, one winter my parents decided to take a vacation to ski in Aspen and let my sister watch the house for them. They told her no parties, but she of course completely ignored this, and a day after our parents left, my sister sent out invites for a party the next Saturday, promising free alcohol. However, she called me and asked me to go get alcohol for her party, but I refused because my parents had banned any drinks from being present. She also wanted me to pay for it, and if I did, she'd invite me to the party. Also, being under 21, I told her that I wasn't going to break the law to make her happy and that she should have never told people her party would have alcohol. She screamed at me over the phone that I was ruining her life, and that she couldn't take back the invites now that they were all over her Facebook. I looked at her post and face-palmed. I told her that what she did was really stupid, and she and her friends were all underage and couldn't just drink illegally. She tried to say it'd only be illegal if I snitched on them, but of course I wouldn't. I also had no intentions of buying her booze. She screamed at me some more, so I hung up the phone. Well, that night my sister had the party and someone called the police for underage drinking. After being arrested and confronted by police, my sister threw me under the bus and said that I'd supplied the alcohol she was using. Turns out she actually broke into Dad's liquor cabinet and thought it'd be better to frame me for her crime. Police came and arrested me at my apartment the day after the party. They seemed already convinced I was guilty and didn't really listen to me when I said I was never there. At the station, I told them the whole story and got them to look at my sister's Facebook post. Thankfully, there were a few people there who listened to me, but I still had to sit the night out in a cell while my parents were called. My mom and dad flew back home overnight and bailed out both my sister and I. My mom tried making my dad leave me in jail because my sister had told them her lies as well. My dad took the time to talk to me and I told him everything that had happened. He seemed to be convinced by my story and believed me, but of course, this started a huge argument between my parents. When they got home, my dad discovered my sister had broken into his liquor cabinet and spoke to police on my behalf. My mom, however, still wanted the blame to fall on me because, as she put it, the charges were ruining her baby's future. But my innocence was further proven by the fact that I and my car were seen on CCTV when I left work, and when I arrived home soon after, as the apartment I was living in then had CCTV cameras to watch the parking lot. My car did not move from there for the rest of the day. In my sister's story to the police, I had driven out and gotten the alcohol for her, but I wasn't seen on CCTV in any liquor store in the county, and my bank account showed no transactions buying alcohol. My parents' house also had a camera at the front door, and my car was never seen in the driveway that day. My sister gave up on her lies, and my parents were severely disappointed in her. My mom still tried to convince me to take the fall for my sister because it would make me more of an older sister. One night, she came into my room and demanded that I tell the police that it was all my fault. I said I wasn't going to ruin my future for my sister, but she refused to leave and went from demanding to begging. She even got on her knees and tried to convince me that she and my dad would make everything okay in the long run if I just took the blame now. I said I'd rather live my life poor than have that felony on my record. She threw a huge fit and started throwing things because I refused to do as she wanted. I threatened to call the police and she left my room cussing me out like a mad woman. As she was about to close the door, I heard her say that she should have aborted me. My dad wasn't home, so I called him right away and told him everything that happened. He was insanely pissed and got in a huge fight with my mom as soon as he got home. I was listening to them fight and my mom didn't even deny anything she said or did, because she deemed it would have been for the greater good of their daughter. My dad told her that she couldn't destroy me to save my sister, but my mom disagreed. He then threatened to divorce her if she didn't try to make things right, and she ended up sobbing, saying she'd do whatever he wanted. My dad said that it was couples and family counseling, or it was divorce. My mom signed a prenup before she married him, and really had no choice. In the family counseling, I called her out on how she always believed my sister's lies. My sister tried to say they were not lies. I'd taken the time to write a list of all the ones I could remember from the past decade that had all been proven she lied. My mom and sister were forced to stay silent as I read them all. They tried to interject repeatedly, but my dad and the counselor silenced them. My sister, now proven beyond a doubt to be a liar and a manipulator, just shut down and refused to say anything more to the counselor. My mom finally apologized to me, but it was obviously a forced apology because she looked so uncomfortable doing it. I told her that her apology was very fake, and after so many years of favoritism, the damage was already done. My relationship with her never really recovered, because she was convinced I was guilty no matter what was said until my sister admitted the truth, and then wanted me to pretend to be the guilty one anyway to protect her favorite child. Nothing went her way, so she just went back to crying about it. When my sister went to court, my mom pleaded with the judge to go easy on my sister for the charges of underage drinking and giving other underage people alcohol, as well as attempting to frame me for her crime. They kept her in a cell overnight to sober up, and then she told police I'd been the one to provide the alcohol. My sister's lawyer used the fact that the alcohol had not been bought that day, but rather had already been in the house long before the party happened to help lessen the charges. The judge just wanted the case over with, so my sister got off with a huge fine that our mom paid most of out of her own pocket, and a couple years probation. She's never really shown actual remorse for what she did and only had animosity for me, no matter how wrong she was. She was eventually diagnosed as a narcissist after her dad made her see a doctor. After her probation and 4 years of college were over, she decided she was going to leave home for California and never come back once she landed a good job. My parents settled everything for her there, even her job, and she has not shown any real appreciation for it. She tried doing her best to cut her off from us, but she could not because she was too reliant on my dad. He's pretty much disowned her and stopped caring if she'll ever talk to him again. I, on the other hand, had some hope that she would change, but I wish I never reached out to her because what she did next will shock you.
I effed up my marriage and it is killing me. My wife and I have been married for 13 years, and together for 15. We have 2 kids together and 3 from a previous marriage. Our marriage has been wonderful, and we have both been incredibly happy. Obviously there are bumps and obstacles, but we managed to get through it. Much of our marital success has been through communication and culpability. We own our mistakes and know when to apologize. I couldn't ask for a better partner or best friend. She's all I want. About 4 years ago we started getting a little more kinky in the bedroom. It led to us involving fantasies of other people being with each other. The fantasies, role play, and kinks grew, and we eventually started getting comfortable with the idea of swinging. We perused the lifestyle in different mediums and played out different scenarios, but never did anything because we weren't comfortable starting this new lifestyle until my wife was happier with her weight. Over those 4 years our fantasies expanded into ideas about more poly relationship stuff. In my head I was having no issues and felt comfortable, turned on to it, and excited at the prospect of my wife being with someone else sexually. In my head, we talked a lot over this time frame to make sure we were both okay with it. She was not quite comfortable with me being with someone else, but I told her that was okay and that she could feel differently after she hooked up for the first time. We knew she would be the first because I was too exhausted to really consider putting any effort into an additional relationship on my end. So I reassured her that I was okay with her finding someone. I told her all I wanted was for her to send me pics and videos and I would be happy. I was 100% convinced I was okay. Recently she and I agreed she could start talking to guys and see where things go. Randomly, while she was wading through men on our different platforms, she was messaged by a guy she knew when we originally met. Prior to her meeting me they had hooked up. Didn't bother me. They started talking and then she asked if he could be the guy. I told her it was absolutely fine. Again, in my head it was. They made a plan for an overnight stay and things were then in the works. The day came and she went to his place where she spent all day and night and the following morning having intimacy. There was a point after she started having intimacy with him that she sent me a message excited to tell me she wrote him, because she was partly doing this for me. She knew I had wanted this and was so happy to finally tell me it had happened. It hit me at the moment I read that message that I had made a deadly error, that I hadn't in fact wanted her to do this without me being there the first time. My heart sank, my mind went numb, and I no longer knew how to feel. To me it was like I missed something important, and not only that, but because I wasn't there I had allowed a disconnect to occur between us. I was not in the lifestyle, she was without me. I did not know how to respond to her but felt it was selfish of me to reverse everything we had been leading up to and telling her I didn't want it this way. But it was too late. Even if I had told her to come home, she had already had intimacy with him. The rest of the night into the next day was filled with fluctuating high panic attacks, anxiety, depression, numbness, and disappointment in myself. I have been angry at things I've done, But this was one of my biggest regrets. I am so angry at what I allowed and fooling myself into thinking I was okay with her doing this without me. I couldn't hide my feelings. How the F could I? They were far too heavy to pretend like they didn't exist. She felt it. With my single word responses and attempts to avoid an explanation of how I was doing, I knew she could feel the vibe had changed. I raged at myself for being such a pathetic effing insecure selfish brat. She was doing it for me. I gave her 100% confidence in what she was doing. She came home the next day and I told her. We both felt broken by this. Confused. Shaken. I hate myself because this is not how I wanted her to feel. I told her nothing she did was wrong. I don't blame her and I hold no ill will towards the guy she slept with. I don't. I am furious at myself for not recognizing what would be an issue before it was too late. She was in tears because she knew I wasn't looking at her the same way anymore, and that now she doesn't know what to do. And I told her I don't know either. It feels like the kind of heartbreak that may be akin to missing your child's first steps because they were at daycare. But it was more than that, because it began feeding into other things. My insecurities blew the F up. My paranoia jumped. My fears over losing her grew exponentially. Now I know she will start resenting me because I can't handle her doing it again unless I was there with her. But that to her is constraining now that we've been so accepting of a poly lifestyle for so long. She likes him. He made her feel good. They took pics and videos for me, which I have watched, but she wanted that other thing outside of us. Initially when she came home I didn't want to be touched, but over a few hours it was hard for me to see her in tears and I did my best to turn the switch and see if I could reverse my mentality. I held her for a while, and then I decided I was comfortable reclaiming her, which she was afraid I wouldn't want. After we had intimacy, which was amazing, I felt a little more comfortable with things and told her I was trying to figure poop out, but that I didn't want my F cup to deter us from our plans, and that this issue mainly came down to me not being there the first time. It truly made me feel like my wife was in another life altogether without me. I told her it was okay to keep talking to him, but any future experiences should be done together. I could see that bothered her and I understood why. Eventually last night we got into another discussion about how distant this all made me feel from her. She asked if I wanted her to step back, but as much as I want her to, I truly don't because it's what she wants and I do my best to make her happy. I didn't want this to feel like a trap. I didn't want it to come off like manipulation. I 100% thought I was okay, that it's what we both wanted. Why the F did my imagination have to be such a powerful potent form of confidence building that I relied on it to tell me how I would actually feel? Why didn't we agree to take our initial experiences slowly and as a couple? Now every day I have a panic attack thinking about it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it.